Hello, my name is Jeannie, and I'd like to welcome you to my brain because today I'm going to be explaining my thought process around the Human Design Channel 4323, which is called the Channel of Structuring or the Genius to Freak Channel. And I'm going to be explaining based on the research I did, the information I gathered. I consulted different sources, and I started with this channel because intuitively I felt called. I kept thinking, it felt like I was being led to dive deeper into this channel. So this is one channel that I particularly have. If you're curious, if you're new to my world, I am a projector, 6'2" profile, have a self-projected authority, and I have a lot of individual circuitry. And this channel in particular is individual circuitry. And I wanted to share my findings and my personal experience with y'all because diving into this information really helped explain a lot of things for me. So, gonna go ahead and get started. This channel of structuring is the one that links the throat at gate 23, which is the gate of splitting apart, to the ajna center through gate 43, which is the gate of breakthrough. This is the channel that's described as the channel of the world's greatest thinkers, or better said, if there's a phrase to describe this channel, it'd be the world's greatest thinkers. Yeah. Okay, this is how the channel works too, that which just happened. But basically, concepts are grasped as insights that have been broken through in gate 43. They're restructured and then they're expressed through the 23rd gate. So some of the gifts from this channel is if you have this channel, you're here to impact the way people see things. And this is an insight that breaks new ground and can completely change how other people view the world. So if you have this channel, you have this ability to paint a bigger picture for everyone, which helps bring structure to their lives. It's also got kind of this third eye vibe, where our world is built on a succession of perceptive mental assessments and observations. So it feels like, one observation after another, and then they're restructured, and then you're able to express them through the throat center. So out of all the channels, the information says that this is the most empowering channel that there is, because it's you're forever fizzing with flashes of insight that have an urgency to be articulated, because you're quite literally someone that speaks their mind. Which I thought was very interesting, because this is something that has popped up for me. I feel like I tend to hold back myself a lot, especially in social situations. As a child, I was very quiet, so I don't feel like this really applied to me. But I thought of children who might not restrain themselves as much. They could get their parents in a pickle because they're just saying whatever they see. We're going to get into that in a little bit. Another gift of this channel is that you have the capacity to blow people out of the water, because your lucidity can be light years ahead of most people. Your innovative thinking is based on improving the efficiency of how energy is used. And this is completely true. I am really huge on efficiency. If I see something that's taking way too long, or it's going to require much more energy than it really needs to, I don't want any part of it. I'm not wasting my energy like that. But this is one of the parts that I really liked about the information that I came across. It says it's not about gradual improvement and modification of existing functions, but about thinking that can bring quantum leaps. So it's we have this ability to develop techniques and concepts that enhance efficiency. So the mind can look at the way something has been done or is being done and suddenly know a much better and faster way of doing the same thing, thus creating a quantum leap. Okay, so with this channel, you might notice that you have an obsession with structuring, with the intention to increase efficiency. So basically the goal is that you're trying to do anything as simple as possible, reducing the number of steps required to complete it so that you spend as little resources as possible. Resources could be time, money, energy, things like that. And you really find innovative ways to simplify your life. And I find myself like where it says like you have this obsession with structuring, I find that I relate to that a lot, because normally I keep going over the process or over the system in my head until I absolutely cannot simplify it anymore. It's kind of like when you're dividing, you know, like I was never really good at math, so maybe I shouldn't have gone with that example. But it's like you keep dividing the thing until it can no longer be divided anymore. That's the vibe. And for me, it kind of feels like a challenge. Like, no, there's got to be a way where I can save more time or save more physical energy. And if I come up with it, I do tend to come back to my system from time to time, reevaluate and see, okay, can I simplify it further? Which for me, like, it's fun, like it's a challenge for me, in a very good way. So some examples and like how this plays out in, you know, your life if you have this channel is like, if you're driving, when you're driving, your brain will automatically calculate like which route is going to be faster, shorter, it's going to save you gas. Or like when I'm running errands, if I have like, normally right now I'm doing like 2 or 3 stops at a time. Physically I can't do more than that for the time being, but I'll literally map out in my head, okay, I go here first, then here, because that's going to save me time, it's going to be quicker, I'm going to spend less gas, things like that. But it's done very automatically, very quickly, like without even thinking about it. Some other examples that I read about, which I don't particularly, like I haven't done this, I don't think, washing dishes. Like people literally have systems of like how to wash dishes in a way where it's less, you know, wasting less water and takes less time. So yeah, I thought this was like, I totally relate to this. A more personal example of like how this plays out when it involves other people, this story came to mind. There was a time where my mom had just received her social security card. So she was trying to memorize her social security number. And this woman was like really good with numbers. I, on the other hand, I've had like a love-hate relationship with numbers where like I want to understand them, but my brain just has trouble processing them sometimes. But she kept trying to memorize the numbers and she wasn't getting anywhere. And she had been at it for like maybe 20-30 minutes and she decided to give up. She's like, I give up, I don't even need the social security number. If I apply for credit, I always use your number anyways, which I already know, so I have no interest in learning this number. And I excuse me, and I was like completely like, well, what do you mean you're gonna give up? Like, how? I don't understand. Like, if you get numbers so well, why is this so hard for you? So I asked her to hand me the card. And I take a look at the card, and I promise y'all, I probably only looked at it for like 5 to 10 seconds. And I said, Mom, this is the easiest thing ever. Look, the first number, I think the number of people in our family. The second and third number, the year you were married. And then fifth and sixth number, the year I was born. And then all you really have to memorize are the last 4 numbers. So it's like number of people in our family, year you were married, year I was born, last 4, and you're done. And she looked at me like mouth wide open, like, oh my god, you're right. Like memorized the number after I restructured it for her in less than a minute, and she never ever forgot it after that. So this is a very like real life practical example of like how this channel works, and we're gonna cover in a little while like more on like how it's really meant to be used to help other people. Okay, so some facts around this channel, because it's it involves the gate 23, which is located at the throat center. Kind of like the voice of that gate is I know. So you might be someone who says I know a lot. That's me. For me, saying like I know feels very natural, like it comes out of me a lot. Um, and it's like a knowingness, this knowingness that's instant, and it's described like an epiphany, okay, like a sudden flash of insight, of knowingness. And the thing is, like, you don't know how you know, you just know. And I remember like this playing out a lot throughout my life. I also have like other aspects of my chart that I feel like make this particular channel very powerful and very intuitive. I have a lot of open centers in my chart, so I'm able to like take in a lot of information and process a lot of information. And also, like, from a gene key perspective, there's one in particular that's describes how like I'm really good at reading people. So for me, like, I really resonated with this. Like, I sometimes just know things about people without knowing how I know them. I just do. Another characteristic of this channel is that it's deeply auditory and it learns best by listening. So for me, I find that this is very true. Like, if I'm watching a master class, I feel like it's much easier and better for me to listen to it as I'm doing something else. Because I do tend to pick up on a lot of information just by listening. Now, kind of like a warning regarding the listening component of this channel, the information says that this listening is self-directed, meaning that you hear what you want to hear, and once you hear it, you get lost in thought. Sometimes they call this the channel of not listening, and it's not that we can't hear you, it's that we get lost in our own thoughts and tune out the outer world. And part of the reason this happens, based on the information that I've read, is that the intention is to retain the integrity of our inner knowing, and that's why we might appear deaf to others. So one way to kind of work with this, because there are times, like I've noticed it in myself, especially when I'm talking to someone else, mentally, like I feel like I go down different rabbit holes and I tune the person out. And if it's someone that you don't really know, they might not be as understanding, and it might, you might come off as like disrespectful. So one of the suggestions that I came across is touch. How to incorporate touch to kind of help keep you grounded. So trying to decide if I want to go into this now or later. I think we'll go into it later, because I do have a section on like conditioning and my suggestions on how to work through conditioning. So we'll just keep in mind that touch does help bring you back in from wherever our minds and our thoughts have taken us. If you've got this channel, you're probably someone who needs and loves silence. I find this is particularly true for me when I have a lot of mental activity, like a lot of thoughts going on, or when like I really need to think. I prefer it to be really quiet, like silent. When I'm driving, like if I all of a sudden I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or I'm trying to determine like which way to go, or if I all of a sudden have to at a stop or something, I turn down the radio or turn it off, because like I need silence. And also, like at home, I tend to do a lot better when it's quiet. And I do tend to experience a little bit of sensory overload, especially when there's a lot of sound. So it's, for me, sometimes a little bit challenging to be in very crowded places and very loud places. So just kind of see if that applies to you. And it's not always, it's mainly when I'm really, really thinking, in that process of a lot of thinking. This is a channel that can also, or the person can experience sounds or voices inside their heads, which to me feels very true. Like I feel like it can get very, very loud in my head. And it's interesting because I had been asking for guidance as to like, sometimes I do hear voices, like a voice. I mean, I don't want to freak anyone out, but it's like I originally thought it was what maybe someone who is a splenic authority felt, because like when you have a splenic authority, you kind of get like this gentle whisper, which is the way that, you know, your intuition kicks in. So I was wondering, like, is that it? Like, is that a splenic, you know, type of thing, or that I'm experiencing, or is it something else? So it could also be this channel, where sometimes like my insights come in the form of a gentle voice. But again, like I'm guessing it could be the splenic center sometimes. But one of the things that they say helps is listening to or playing music. This can be extremely soothing, a soothing way for us to release that mental pressure. And this is something that I have really been playing with lately. My brother got a set of noise canceling headphones, and he said, you know, you've got to try these because these things are amazing. So he let me borrow his. I'm like, oh, I think I really like these. So I got myself a pair, and I've been using them mainly right before like I go to sleep, and I've been sleeping so much better. Because like obviously they're noise canceling, so it's a different type of silence. And I find myself, like I said, falling asleep faster, and my quality of sleep has improved a lot. I've also been using them like as I study, and like I'm really loving them. So that's something you might want to look into if you find like you have trouble sleeping. Try it out and see if that helps. Let's see. Oh, in order to release that mental pressure, this is what I want to talk about too, because I think it's important. For me, I find like it's particularly important because my authority is like self-projected, which basically means that the way I tune into my intuition, to my inner knowing, is through speaking. And I notice that when I don't give myself kind of like that verbal outlet, the pressure inside my head does tend to build up. And it doesn't feel like headache, because it's not pain, it's not a sharp pain. It just literally feels like pressure, like a balloon. Like my head is a balloon, and I feel that pressure inside my head. So what I started doing, first intuitively, and then I came across this information, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm on the right path, is I started talking. Even if it was to myself. Like before, I feel like I didn't experience this mental head pressure as much because I had my mom to talk about anything and everything, and we spent like so much time together. That helped that mental pressure not build up. After she passed away, I really didn't have anyone like her that I could talk to, where I didn't feel judged, where I felt, you know, completely safe to say anything and everything I wanted. So that's when I started to notice more of the mental pressure building up. And there were times where like it was really hard to do anything. It was really hard to get out of bed because of that pressure in my head. Or it's like just even hard to think. So what I started doing is just talking to myself, which is a little weird at first, but I would tell my family, look, y'all, I know sometimes they didn't have the patience like mom did to help me talk things out, or other times they would just kind of stare at me, and I'd be like, well, you're not helping, like ask me something. They're like, well, we don't know how to help you, we don't know how to ask you. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I had to kind of like figure it out on my own, like, okay, how am I gonna help myself, you know, feel better and release this pressure? So I started talking to myself, and I started telling them, hey, if you walk past my room or somewhere and I'm just randomly talking out loud, I'm not crazy. I just need to get this out so that the pressure in my head goes away. Another thing I started to do is recording voice notes. I find that voice notes really help me tune into, like, what do I sound like when I say this, and there's another very important reason that we're going to get into in a little bit about like why voice notes are really going to be a game changer for you if you have this channel, especially if you're a projector with that self-projected authority. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So I already mentioned how like there's a component of knowingness with this channel, and this is a knowing that is not backed up by facts. So you really, really kind of have to learn to stand your ground and explain your insights or the ways you see things, because they might seem freakish to other people and completely like outside of the box and outside of the norm. So it's like you really have to practice like that courage of like and conviction and expressing your knowingness with conviction, because many people are gonna be like, what are you talking about? Like that's, I don't get it. Okay, next we're going to talk about the word insights. And this is, I think that everything that happened within the past couple of weeks and days for me definitely led me to exploring this channel more, because I kept thinking like very intuitively about the word insights, and I was contemplating this word insights. And this channel is the one that determines the gift to receive insights. And it's a process that starts automatically, and the results cannot be saved. So this is the reason why I mentioned like voice notes might be a very good option if you've got this channel, especially if you're a projector, especially if you have a self-projected authority. And okay, another thing is that the wisdom of this channel is expressed only here and now. Okay, it's related to what I was just saying before. If the insight is not formulated correctly, then it can be lost forever. This is why I've really gotten into just recording myself and hearing myself talk, because one, I never know what's going to come out. And because it can happen so fast, and sometimes it's just the way that it's articulated in the moment, that if I don't have a record of it, or if I can't quite remember exactly how I said it, it's kind of lost. Like the magic of it is lost a little bit. Like the essence, you can still tap into it and like it'll remain, but it's not as pure and it's not as magical as when it originally came out. And it kind of feels like when you're on a riff or something, and just words are just flowing and flowing and flowing, and if someone asks you, can you repeat that, you can kind of get the essence, but it's not going to be the same as how you originally said it. So that's why I highly recommend like start recording yourself in coaching sessions. If you are someone that has a coach, I would recommend you ask for your sessions to be recorded, because again, you're never going to know. You're not exactly going to be able to predict like what's going to come out of your mouth. And I think it's always nice to have something that you can play back, so you can hear yourself and hear that knowingness, that inner wisdom that just naturally came out of you. Because there are times where like I'll say something and it'll feel like it was this insight, but like I'm just so concentrated on allowing it to come out that I don't even quite grasp what it is that I just said. So having something to be able to replay definitely does help, or just try to jot it down afterwards. But I really do think that a lot of magic can be lost because you can't write as quickly as you can say it. And just like from a little personal example that came to mind is like I have recently been looking, I have been looking for a while for like a coach to help me work through some stuff or through some things, especially after my dad passed away. And I did come across this gentleman who, amazing coach, amazing human being. I love watching him work. I love his work. And he posted like this question box on Instagram, and I posted a question about like pain, because during that time I had so much pain around my shoulders, and I had done everything I could think of to figure out where is this coming from, why is this manifesting, what's my body trying to tell me, and I wasn't really getting anywhere. So I asked him a very short question like, how can I like deal with this pain? And then he kind of like gave me like this intuitive answer, and he offered to give me this complimentary session with him, which I signed up for, and it wasn't recorded. It was a 90-minute session, and we got so much done in that session that part of me was like, oh, I really wish I had been recorded, because there were so many beautiful moments in the conversation that I have no way of, like, tapping into them other than my memory. And then I found myself going like, I want to remember everything because like it was so good. And I hardly ever come across someone where I can really say like, that was a really good session. Kind of very particular with who I work with. And later when I reached out to him and asked him like, hey, do you think we could record the next one? He's like, I don't think recording it for you would be very good, because I feel like you are trying to get the most you can out of the sessions, and that's not gonna be of service to you right now. What we want to do is get you to get what you need and let go. And I'm like, okay, I can kind of see what you're saying. Because like I did want to kind of like go back and be able to go deeper by replaying it, because like that won't be the best thing for you. So I respected his opinion. I think he still kind of gave me the opportunity to record it if I wanted to, but I'm like, I got a little bit ticked off to be completely honest. I think intuitively this is part of the reason why, because I feel for me like a lot of those insights come out very naturally, and I don't always, like for me personally, I don't always grasp them like in the moment. I do, but being able to replay it and hear myself and like see myself and hear like, okay, how did this come out? What tone? Things like that helps me really be able to shift. So different coaches work different ways. I'm pretty sure if I would have explained, okay, this is why I feel like I need it, he would have said yes. But for me, I was really leaning into like, no, I can do this, I can figure this out. And there are other aspects of my chart too where I can understand why that triggered me a little bit, like him saying no. Like, I don't think that's good for you. That's a different story. Okay, let's go back to the information. So there are 2 recommendations that I found with people with this channel. One, they say expand your vocabulary. And I've also very intuitively been doing this, and what I've been doing is feeling into different words, into the vibration of different words, into the energy of different words. How do they feel? And an example of this is like when I was going into the material, I think from the Gene Key perspective, there's like insight, right? I was focusing and contemplating the word insight. And then in the Gene Key material, I mentioned how the Japanese word for insight is satori. So I started contemplating satori, which essentially is the same thing. It means the same thing as insight. But when I said the word insight feels very like, bam, insight. It feels a little more masculine to me. Whereas satori, I feel like it rolls out off differently off the tongue. And I just naturally smile a little more when I say satori than insight. Did y'all feel that little shift in energy? Insight, satori, like I can't help but smile. So this is what I mean by like feel into different words. Thesaurus might help, where you're expanding your vocabulary. It might mean the same thing, but the energy you put behind, or the energy that naturally comes out of you behind the word it's going to be different. It's just like the insight, satori. So just my personal suggestion based on my personal experience. You can play with it and see how you feel about it. The second suggestion is hold rehearsals in your head. Now, I found there's 2 different schools of thought on this. Some people say don't hold rehearsals, or some material says hold rehearsals, and I'm going to explain in a little bit the difference between doing it and not doing it. But we're going to pause here and move on to the next section, and we'll come back to this in a little while. So now I'm going to talk about some suggestions I have if you have this channel. They say that there might be a struggle to translate insight into language, right? Because you're going from the ajna to the throat. So the ajna is kind of like where the concepts are, and then through the throat is where, and the throat is the one that, you actually express the language from, or the words from. So your goal is to get the message across in a simple, tactful manner. Why? Because this channel is literally called the Genius to Freak channel, which means you're gonna get one of two reactions. There is no middle ground. Okay, let me make that very clear. You're gonna get one of two reactions. You're either gonna be seen as a genius or as a freak. Okay, so some questions to ask yourself. Is this something people are ready to hear? This is a projected channel, so even if you're not a projector, if you have this channel, you're still going to want to look for an invitation to express what you want to say. So asking yourself, is this something people are ready to hear? Have I received an invitation? And this is my personal question that I added on. Can I sense when the invitation has been revoked? Because normally, like I say this many times, but I feel like I'm quite sensitive to the energy of other people, so I can really sense, like, we'll start with like a really open invitation, and I can really sense when the invitation has been revoked. So from personal example, like I've learned to tune into like, okay, the invitation is no longer there, even though the person hasn't really said anything, and then I'll just drop it, because I know it's not going to be the best use of my resources, energy, time. They're not going to hear me, and I'll just drop it and keep going. Something that I've done recently is, because it can be really hard to drop it, because you just have this insight that you want to share with the person, but if they're not available to hearing it, it's not going to be good for you, because you're not going to feel heard, you're not going to feel recognized, and you can very easily shift into like bitterness if you're a projector. So what I've done recently is like remind myself they're not going to receive it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this knowing, and I'm just going to take it with me, and I know like it feels like this little box, this little gift box that is meant to go to someone else or somewhere, and there's going to be some point in the future where this is going to be perfect for somebody else, and it's just going to be a better process for everyone if I just take it with me and remind myself that I am going to use it at a later point, because sometimes you feel like, but this is so good and it's going to help them and it's going to change their life, but it's not if they're not willing to listen. So take it with you, and remember, you are going to use it at a better moment with maybe someone else or maybe the same person, but at a later date. Another thing to look out for is your tone of voice. This is going to be your greatest ally, okay? Normally people with this channel, they have a very unique sounding voice, okay? Thinking back from my personal life, I remember this time where Mom said, there's something about your voice that when you talk, people listen. And I remember looking at her like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, I don't see anything special with my voice. But that's the way she described it. There's something about your voice that when you talk, people listen. And when I thought back, I'm like, yeah, I can really see how like there have been moments where I talk and like I really am able to capture a person's attention. Obviously, if that invitation's there, I feel like many times the invitation is more energetic, and because I can really tune into it and read the energy, I've been able to express my thoughts or things, insights with people without them necessarily asking for them, but they are available to receive them. So tone is as important as the words you express, because it can convey authenticity, confidence, and knowing. So learn or practice playing with tone. Sing the same thing in a different tone, record yourself, and see if you can tune into the difference of like how the words feel. Or if you've got family, you can very touchily like practice like they don't have to know you're practicing. You could just say, okay, let me try saying this same phrase in different tones to different people around me and see what reaction I get. So it could kind of turn into like this fun little game where you're doing the inner work in a very practical manner in your daily life. Okay, another thing is that if you have this channel, you might have a deep need to talk things through with others in order to hear what you know, and what you know will often come as a surprise to you. Okay, this is also why I recommend recording it. If you're with other people, like obviously get their consent. If you can't record it, that's okay, but just be aware that what you know will sometimes like even surprise you. And the information describes as like you just blurt it out. And we're going to talk about flirting in a little while, because boy, do I have stories on blurting things out. So my recommendation is have someone, like a really close friend, a best friend, or a team of people that you can go to and use them as a sounding board. Like obviously, I like as a projector, and this is projector, this is particularly important. If you're a different type, it might not be as important, but I do know, like, I think I had a friend who, I think she's a generator or a Mani-Gen, and she's got this channel, and for her, like, intuitively, I felt like she's someone that needs to talk things out with people. But a lot of people were telling her, like, no, you need to tune into your gut and this and that. And I'm like, no, that's not, even though that's traditionally what human design sounds like, intuitively, I'm feeling like she is someone who needs to talk things out with people. And when she started doing that, she started getting, to where she wanted quicker, because that knowingness is coming out of her through the self-projected channel. So, okay, this is particularly important. Like, if you're a parent with a child that's got this channel, you want to, a child with this channel in particular, they need to constantly be encouraged to explain their thinking, okay? And the sooner they can do this, like in their childhood, this is going to save them difficulty later in life, and you as a parent are going to be able to coach them on how to handle social interactions. Because like for me, I struggled so much socially as a child, to the point where social interactions were so hard that I just preferred to be by myself. Like, I had mom, she was all I really needed. She did her best to try to coach me. Obviously, she did not have access to this information. Otherwise, it would definitely have been, like, she would have used it, because that woman, like, if you're a mama or if you're a dad and you're watching this, like, you love your children and you want to help them. And definitely, like, the sooner you introduce your child to these concepts and how to work with their energy, it's going to help them so much later on in life. And I'm actually, like, because of this today, like, I feel like I received that insight where I want to create something for parents of projector children. So that's something I'm very excited about. I already have a ton of ideas. It might be kind of like this mastermind or like a mini course. So if you're watching this and you're a parent to a projector child, or someone who has, a child with this channel, like, check back in the space, because that's something I definitely want to create. So for me as a child, like I said, I was very quiet. I was very quiet, especially in social situations. I wouldn't really say much, but I would just be observing everything. And then when I got home and it was just mom and me, I would just start talking about everything that I saw. I'm like, did you see someone do this? And then they did this, and then this happened, and I knew that was gonna happen, But I didn't really do that, like, with other people. I just, with mom, because I really trusted her and I felt safe with her. When we talk about flirting, I'm going to introduce, like, some other thoughts of, like, if you have a child with this channel, like, they might get you in trouble as a parent. Let's continue. So, because you're here to bring change to the world with this particular channel, the most respectful thing people can do for you is to ask you what you know and be given the time and space to think. I think that this is one of the things that would really, like, light me up and really like helped me feel so much loved and so very, very seen as someone. When someone asks me, how do you see this? Because I'm like, I get to nerd out and geek out and explain, like, this is what I see and this is why, you know. But of course, like, not many people are interested in asking many times. Normally, that's what I find happens. So if you've got someone with this channel, ask them. And I promise, like, it's going to be such a beautiful conversation. Two things to note here. Because it says, like, sometimes you need to be given the time and space to think. Take the space. Take the space, because, right, we're going from ajna to throat. So sometimes the concepts need a little time to be restructured so that they can be articulated in a very simple, clean way so that the person can understand it. If you don't have a lot of time, or the person can't really give you time, what I do is in the moment, I'll say, okay, I'm going to start saying words, and it might be a little bit messy, and it's not my final answer, but I will let you know when it's my final answer. So it's kind of like I work out the thoughts. I just kind of it feels like a ball of yarn, and I have to start pulling out the yarn in order for it to get really simple and really clean, and that the person can understand me. So it's like I just start talking, and when I get to my answer where I can finally see it, it's clean, it's clear, okay, this is my final answer. So obviously, if it's someone you know, or they know that that's how you work, it might be a little bit easier, and they might, you know, be more understanding. If it's someone you don't know, I normally ask, can I have a little bit of time, or by when do you need an answer? And then I'll say, okay, let me think about it, and I will get back to you before then. That gives you time and space to be able to talk it out. Voice note, again, you could do it via voice note, and then once it's really clean, you can say, okay, here, and it'll be quicker. With this channel, you love to think and you need to think. I love to think. I think I spend a lot of my day just thinking and just coming up with these thoughts and ideas. Like, I really do love to think. But one thing to keep in mind is that the head and ajna centers are awareness and thoughts. They're not decision-making places. So if you're making a decision, all right, it's something that involves making a decision, you want to tune into your authority, not rely on these two centers. Another very important thing to be aware of is that you need to learn to let go of control, because you have to allow your mind to process its knowing in its own way and timing. People with this channel are described as melancholic minds, where inspiration comes suddenly and unexpectedly. It can never be controlled or predicted. Okay, so what I do is, like, while I'm waiting for the insight to drop, use your time more efficiently by learning to develop a proficiency for explaining what you know simply and clearly. So practice, expand your vocabulary, like we've already talked about. And the benefit of doing this is that you'll get more opportunities to express your unique insights, your own genius, in a very natural manner, and people will begin to recognize you. Another thing I really want to emphasize on this section is that if you try to control or force the generation or creation of the insight, you end up prolonging its revelation. So it's like the more you look for it, the more you want, the more you're like, I want this insight to drop in, the longer it's going to take. You need to give it complete freedom. Your mind, that freedom it needs to process on its own. What it's like for me, like what it feels like, it's like the concepts are brewing in the background. They're brewing in the back of my head. It's processing in the background, and the more I distract myself, the quicker they drop in. So I go do something else, like, and this is still something that I'm building a lot of awareness around, because sometimes it's something that's bugging me so much that I obsess over it. And I just remind myself, oh yeah, the more I look for it, the less I'm going to find it. So I'm going to go do something else. I'll go for a walk, and I will embody that experience to the fullest. Like if I'm going for a walk, like I am fully taking my mind off the thing I'm trying to solve, and I will focus on embodying the walk, on experiencing, like, what do I see, what do I smell, can I feel the wind on my skin, can I feel the sun on my face, can I feel my toes touching the ground, like really focus on the experience of the walk or the workout. Or sometimes like I'll go talk to somebody and that'll get myself distracted, and it's like bam 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 bam, like as I'm talking to that person, like a whole lot of things that I have been looking the answers for too, they drop in instantly without like me doing any work. Like it literally feels like you're not doing the work, you're just letting it be processed in the background, and it's going to drop in suddenly, unexpectedly. You cannot control it. You cannot emphasize that enough. You cannot control it. Okay, so again, to emphasize, you don't want to force the mind to give birth to something in the world. You got to give it complete creative freedom so that it can independently generate amazing ideas with undue pressure, so that you can be of service to the people around you and improve the world as a whole. Until the thought is finally formed in your mind, you yourself cannot even imagine what it will be about. As soon as it is formed, the insight takes place, and no matter how complex or vague the concept might be, at the moment it appears to you in its entirely, complete understanding comes to you. So it's kind of like, sorry, my nose is itchy. You can't control it, and it doesn't matter how big or complex the thing might be. Like once it drops in, it's like you have this complete understanding. It's like an epiphany vibe. Super, like I love this channel. Like once you learn how to leverage it, like you literally blow people out of the water. Okay, so now we're gonna go into like the two schools of thought I mentioned earlier. The information says that there's no need or even real ability for you to plan what you will say beforehand. So that's kind of like one way where I can also relate to this, because like before, when I did a lot of presentations in front of people, a lot of public speaking, a lot of people would say to me like, you don't seem nervous when you're up there, like do you not get nervous? Like I would be so nervous. I'm like, I get nervous like as I'm waiting to go up to speak or to present. But once I'm up there, and this is what I would tell people even before I knew this is how I'm built. Well, like once I get up there, I just have like this inner knowing that whatever comes out of my mouth is what's meant to come out, without even thinking about it. So there are times where like I kind of like relax, where I don't practice as much what I'm going to say when I'm around people. I just trust that I'm always going to know what to say, and it's going to come out, and it's going to be fine. I mentioned before that some people recommend rehearsing. Is that later on? Let's see. There it is. They recommend constantly conduct rehearsals of dialogues in your mind, so that at the right time you will be able to accurately and intelligibly voice the knowing that has come. So sometimes I find that rehearsing does help, because I notice like how wordy am I being, and if I'm being too wordy, again, I focus on very intentionally restructuring the thought or the concept and the insight into something that's very simple but very profound, very deep, very potent. So that's what I feel like they mean when you want to rehearse. Practice it. Again, I recommend voice notes, and until you can really explain the concept very clearly, very simply, it feels very clean and crisp, but very potent. I find that both are correct. If you have this channel, it just depends on the circumstance. It depends on the situation. So you might want to feel into like, does it feel like I can just trust myself and that whatever comes out is going to come out, or is this something I want to rehearse? I find like for when I was going over my notes, I found that rehearsing the information, like how I wanted to talk about it, helped a little bit. But like once I started recording, it kind of didn't go like how I rehearsed it. I just naturally started talking and it flowed better. So as you get more practice, you might notice that rehearsing isn't really super efficient, because normally, like, the way I rehearse things, they don't always come out that way. And you'll be able to feel into like what works better for you, either just trusting and you don't even really have to practice, or if you want to practice a little bit. But from my experience, normally how I practice it never really comes out the same way. Just doesn't. Okay, so recognition. Okay, let's do this one first. Your mind is here to embrace your knowing and to explore what isn't known. And this is why you love to think, because we like to explore things that aren't known. And I think that's super cool. Like, I definitely go down like different, or like I've asked questions that some people are like who would even think to ask that? Like, does it matter? Like, that doesn't have an answer. And I'm like, but it has to have an answer. Like, what do you mean? Like, all questions have answers. So another thing I can really relate to. Now we're going to talk about recognition. Recognition is important because it opens the way for your individual knowing to penetrate and mutate the collective or tribe. Because this is part of the individual circuitry. I find that because our ideas and insights can be really radical and very like innovative, very like these far out. I got cut off. Okay. We have like these really innovative ways of thinking that are going to benefit the world, but the world tends to be very like, let's not change anything. If it's not broke, why fix it? So it's going to be very important, especially if you have a lot of individual circuitry, to have someone who doesn't have as much individual circuitry, whether they have more tribal and more collective circuitry, because like I see them like as allies, where by explaining to them, especially like if you have a really good relationship where it's someone who really acknowledges your genius and the way you see things, and they see what a gift that could be, they can see the benefits, this person can start introducing it to the tribe and the collective, and you run less of a risk of being seen as a freak. So this is something that I probably will dive into in other videos, but just wanted to throw that in there. Now we're going to talk about the flirting aspect of this channel. People with this channel, they say that they're prone to being blurters, and this obviously creates a social hardship. When unrestrained, you simply blurt out the first thing that comes to your head, whether it's an insight or a thought. If your mind sees a bad haircut, a fashion faux pas, a terrible mistake at work, it's in constant danger of expressing that truth. This is where we get to the funny part of the video, I couldn't say, because like I have a bunch of personal examples where I can definitely see this playing out. And this is where I said, like, parents, if you've got children that have this channel, they might be prone to blurting things out, and you know, as a parent, it might put you in a very awkward situation, especially if someone that, you know, isn't as understanding. But some personal examples for me, some stories. I have these two girlfriends. They're sisters by blood. Sisters. They're sisters. And we were having this conversation after church. That's why I specified sisters by blood, because I was thinking, like, from a church setting, you know, we also call each other sisters. But anyways, and I was dropping them off, and I don't know how this conversation started, but all of a sudden they started talking about the day that I got married. And what I was sensing is, like, they wanted to guarantee that they were going to get an invitation to my wedding. And I'm like, guys, I'm not even dating. Like, I don't see myself dating anytime soon. Like, there's no one I'm interested in. Like, I don't see the point of this conversation. And then they're like, but we're friends, right? Like, if you ever get married, you would invite us because we're friends. And I remember just looking at them like so perplexed, because I'm like, I don't see the point of this conversation. And I'm like, and yeah, we're friends, but we're not friends. And they got so hurt and offended because I said that we were friends, but we weren't friends. But what I meant by that is like, normally after church, we would go out to have dinner together, like this big group, very like family style. It's super fun. That's one of the things I miss the most about being in that group. Like, we would really have so much fun eating together. But I would notice that like after the dinner, these two girlfriends would invite another friend over to their house to karaoke or to dance or just to hang out and watch movies, but I was never really invited. And I was very thankful that I got to go to dinner because, I have faced a lot of rejection in my earlier years as a child, especially being a projector, not knowing that I was a projector and how my energy worked. I was very thankful that I got to spend some time with people, in a very lovely, setting of like just enjoying a meal together. So I kind of feel a little bummed out that I wasn't invited to like karaoke, but I also felt a little bit relieved because I tend to be like very introverted. I'm not a singer. I know my strengths and my weaknesses. So I did not want to sing, and people have this thing where like sometimes they don't respect that. And I'm like, I'd love to go, but just don't make me sing. I can maybe do the backup chorus with a bunch of people where my voice won't really be that, noticeable. But otherwise, like, I would really love just to watch, because I find for me, like, I need to be able to watch. And I also have like a taste cognition, so it's like I need to taste it by absorbing and kind of like dipping my toe in to decide whether or not I want to go for it. So that's what I meant, like whenever after dinner they wouldn't really invite me, so I considered like we were friends, but we weren't friends because I wasn't really included in a lot of other activities that they had. So I didn't explain that because, they got hurt and they're kind of like not available to listen to me anymore. But what ended up happening is like the older sister got married before I did, and needless to say, I was not invited to the wedding. I was not invited to the wedding. But yeah, that's one example. Another story that comes to mind is I had a friend once. I'm learning to reframe the concept of friendship, because I find that my concept of friendship, like, I like to go really deep, as a projector type of vibe, deep conversations, deep friendships, and things like that. But a lot of people, I feel like their definition of friends is a little bit more broad than mine. So I'm working on reframing that. But I had this friend, and she made this comment about how like she didn't like guys who had like slick back hair, like gelled back hair. And I look at her, I'm like, wait, doesn't your brother have slicked back hair? Because he had just started trying this new thing of slicking his hair back with a lot of gel. And she looked at me like, oh my god, you're right. And she didn't say, but I could see on her face, like, realizing, oh yeah, my brother does do that. And she kind of felt like a little bit embarrassed. And she's like, yeah, but that's different. Because she really loved her brother, obviously, their family. She's like, but that's different. And then I just blurted out, like, why is that different? Just because he's your brother? Without really thinking of the consequences of that question. But it was, for me, like, it just felt like, wait, I don't understand. Like, why is that different? Just because he's your brother? So, another awkward social situation that could have been avoided if I hadn't blurted that out. The last story I will share with y'all, I was going to this grocery store, it's called Publix. I think it's mostly like a chain in the South. But I went there mainly, I don't shop there very often because I feel like it's a little bit pricier, but their fruit and veggie selection, it's really high quality compared to like the one I normally go to. So I do buy some things from there, but in that particular day I went to get a sandwich before work because they have a deli and they make sandwiches, and that's why I was going to the grocery store this particular day. And as I'm walking in, I think I was munching on a granola bar or something, and I see this gentleman, and a lady, and it just felt like it was divine timing, because he literally like looked right at me as I was coming in the doors, and he just looks at me and he goes, and I'm like, I don't understand. And he says, we need water, but he says it in Spanish. He's like, you speak Spanish? I'm like, yeah. He's like, we need water. And I'm like, and? I just blurted out, like, what? But the tone, like, I used this tone of like, like, the water dispenser is like right there. I don't understand why you're telling me that you need water. And it was literally like, I felt like it was a scene out of the movie, and like divine timing, because like during that time I remember I was asking God for help on being like a little more social and interacting with people. This is what God sent me. And I laugh because like they literally, I want to say it was around Christmas time, because I remember they were wearing like these ugly Christmas sweaters. I don't know if that was the intention to wear ugly Christmas sweaters, but they had that vibe. But they were like really, really Christmassy sweaters, and they weren't very tall, and they literally, like, as soon as I saw them, I got like, oh my gosh, like if Santa really had elves as helpers, like this is what they would look like. So after, I'm kind of just looking at them, because like I have this thing where my face kind of doesn't hide what I'm thinking, so I'm kind of looking at them like, I don't understand why they need me. Like, I don't know how, I've never used this dispenser, like I don't even know how it works, like why would you think that I know how it works? And I'm like, okay. I remember my conversation with God. I'm like, I'm gonna try it. Like, I don't know how to do this, but we can figure it out together. So as we're talking, they're asking like, where are you from? They tell me where they're from. That's how long I've been here. We started talking a little bit. Turns out they were visiting family. So they're like, we don't know. He had like coins in his palm. He's like, we don't know your currency. Like, we don't know how much to put in the machine. I'm like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. Now I see why you need my help. So I separated how much coins they were going to use, like 35 cents per gallon. So I separated. I told them this one's 25, this one's 10, this one's 5. You do the math. And I kind of like left them with how much they were going to be needing, and they finished filling up the rest of their jugs. But the more I thought about that during the afternoon, because I'm like, why did this happen? Like, how did I manifest this? I just kept thinking of my original reaction of like, like, what do you want? And I just remember thinking like, my mom would have been so disappointed in me, and she would have like yelled at me for the way I responded, or the way I said and, because my tone, like it could have, I can see how it would have, it sounded rude. Like I sounded rude, but it wasn't my intention, and part of the reason was this channel, I just blurted out, and the tone. So that's something I'm working on, my tone. So now comes the part where I'm going to talk about like what to do, the inner work involved if you have this channel, so that you don't alienate yourself, because that's a very huge kind of like characteristic, or something that can happen if you've got this channel, especially if you're blurring things out. And not that you mean any harm by it, it's just kind of like this inner truth that you can't help but express. I think I had another sheet. Hold on. Okay, I found it. We're almost done, I promise. Okay, we're talking about alienating yourself. And I definitely identify with that a lot, like, because I had such a hard time in social situations where, not only being a projector type and needing that invitation in order to, be able to, how do I want to say this? In order to be more accepted or not feel rejected. There's a lot of, let me start over. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about what to do, like how the inner work involved, especially if you have this channel, primarily so that you don't alienate yourself. For me as a child, I feel like I experienced this a lot. Like, I experienced a lot of rejection I had my mom, and for me, like, I only really needed one person. Like, as a projector, we tend to thrive in like one-on-one settings. So for me, that one-to-one ideal person was my mom. So because it was so hard for me to, and I didn't know how to process like the rejection or like why it happened or how to minimize the occurrence of it, I just completely relied on my mom, and I created a codependent relationship with her. That woman was not codependent on me. She was like very independent. She was okay. Like, she wanted me to be off and doing my own thing, interacting with other kids my age. I just always had a hard time. She didn't know how to teach me. She didn't know I was a projector. Otherwise, like, she definitely would have educated herself and learned tools and looked into resources on how to help me be able to fit in better with other people. Not conform to them, but learn how my energy works and understand myself so that I didn't face so much rejection or prefer to alienate myself, because that's kind of like what I resorted to. Like, okay, if they don't want me, it's okay, I don't need them. You know, I have my mom, I can perfectly happy in my own little world. I don't need them. So I alienated myself a lot, and for me it was a really huge shock to my system when my mom passed away, because she was my person, and not really having a lot of people in my life, it just really took a toll on my mental health. So this is why, part of the reason why I want to include like what doing the inner work looks like, some suggestions, things that I've implemented myself, so that you have an easier time, particularly in social situations. So the first suggestion is to learn restraint. Control the timing of when you speak. Speak in turn. Is there an invitation? Like, really look out, like, is there an invitation? And show tact. And these three things, the result is that your thoughts will seem like the considerate insights of a genius, not a freak. Now, for me, if I'm being completely honest, even with everything that I've learned now, learning restraint is really, really hard for me. There's a lot of aspects of my chart that also, like that individual circuit trait, I say is primarily responsible, where like there's this rebel inside of me, which is very new to me, because normally I was always very like compliant, don't rock the boat type of energy, and now that rebel in me, it's like I kind of want to rock the boat a little bit. So sometimes, even though I feel like I should restrain myself, I will say the thing anyways, but very intentionally, fully being aware of the consequences of me saying the thing, just because like I kind of want to learn a little bit. I kind of want to poke people, but like not in a disrespectful way. Like, obviously, if I don't push it. Sometimes it's more for like, I kind of want to see what happens. I want to learn from this interaction, and I kind of, I want to say it anyways. Again, being fully aware that I am responsible for what I say, and like that people might not react to it very well. But again, like, I don't do this often. Like, I do practice restraint, but sometimes I'm like, I kind of want to say it anyways, so I do. I speak my mind. But this is funny because like as I'm talking about this, just a few days ago, I asked my brother, because I've been thinking about doing a little bit more travel. We've never really been a family that travels much. After Dad passed away, I've really just been thinking about like how I just don't want to wait for the right timing for things anymore. I want to explore things that I've always wanted to do, or things that I thought that I'd never wanted to do. I'm like, maybe, I do, and I just never really gave myself permission for that. But one of the things is travel. So speaking with my brother the other day, I'm like, hey babe, how, like, if we could go anywhere, or like when we can go anywhere, where's the like first place you think would be fun to travel together? Because like I would like to travel with you, if you're up for that, because I feel like he's more interested in traveling with his friends, which I completely understand. Personally, I don't really have a lot of friends that I can travel with, so that's why I'm working on, my social skills. But he's like, I think I'd like to go to Japan with you, but I'm like, but what? He's like, but I'm kind of afraid of taking you to Japan because you would totally offend people and you would not be respectful of their culture whatsoever because you were gonna say things and you can't be trusted. And I'm like, but it's not like they're not true. Like, I could be nice. Like, I could do it. I really could. And he's looking at me like, I don't know about that. I think I definitely will be practicing more restraint. So if I ever do go to Japan, I don't offend anyone there. He's like, he gave me kind of like this visual of like me being in jail or something because of something I said. And I'm like, I know a little bit of their language, so I started saying the words, and he's like, see, this is exactly what I mean. And I'm like, fine. But yeah. Now, moving on, I'm going to talk about some of the conditioning. If you've got this channel, some of the conditioning that you might have, or you might want to work on at some point. You might feel like you're not being heard. So you might have thoughts like, it could express itself in different ways. One, you might be talking louder than you need to, or like screaming at people and they're still not hearing you. Or you might be like, why even bother? They're not going to hear me. Remember that things can go either one of two ways. You can either be a genius or a freak. Obviously, it's going to feel so much better when people see you and view you as a genius and a freak. But you can't really control. I mean, you can kind of like read the room, learn to read the room, so that you can kind of like see where you'd be positioned, whether a genius or a freak. There could be a lot of conditioning around logic, because we have these inner knowings and we don't know how we know. We can't really back up whatever we say by logic. So I mentioned this earlier in the video, like we're really gonna have to stand behind what we say or what we think, our insight, regardless of what other people might think. This might be a bigger issue for like if you're a child, if you have a child with this channel for school. Like many times in school they're asked to explain like how they know things. They might not know. They can't explain it because they don't know. Or if you're grown up at work, sometimes if you're asked to explain how you know something, it might be hard because you don't know, you just know. You don't know how you know, you just know. Another source of conditioning could be that waiting factor, which before I used to get really triggered around feeling like I was just waiting all the time. Just keep in mind there's two forms of waiting. There's passive waiting and there's active waiting. Actively waiting, passively waiting just means or feels to me like I'm just sitting on a couch waiting for people to recognize me so that I can contribute what I know. Actively waiting feels more like I can still be sitting on the couch, but instead I was just kind of like sitting there twiddling my thumbs and kind of thinking like nobody's ever going to recognize me type of thing. I'm actively observing people. I'm observing what they're doing, how they're doing it, what they're saying. I'm observing, I'm collecting data, I'm gathering information. And even if, like I mentioned this earlier too, even if I'm not going to use it or I don't get the opportunity to use it in the moment, I take it with me. I take that information with me and I trust that sometime in the future it's going to come in handy. And that feels so much better. Like I just naturally, I smile. Like I naturally smile. That feels so much better than thinking, great, like I have all this information and it's gonna go to waste because nobody wants it. Different vibe. You can see, no. I get to have all this beautiful information that blows people's minds. I'm gonna take it with me, and then you can kind of create this vibe of like, I know something you don't, like ask me, internally. And people will start asking you without you necessarily asking for the invitation. Another way to kind of work around this is asking questions. Like if you see a situation and you kind of already know how to solve it, how to save time, how, blow people out of the water, I start by asking them a question. and it could look something like, or sound something like, hey, I noticed that you said this. Do you mean this, or have you thought about maybe doing it this way? Or, you're very gently introducing your insight, but in the form of a question. And that, for me, I find tends to be better received than telling them you're doing this and you're wasting time when you could just be doing this. It's not as well received. So kind of like, for me, I adopt like this very playful, mischievous energy where I'm like, have you considered like doing it this way? Or, you know what, can you explain what you meant when you said this? Very playful, where it kind of like gets the person to draw their attention to you, and that way you can play a little bit more with like opening the energy and helping out that way. So that's something that I love to do. I find it more fun than just sitting there, not doing anything. Another source of conditioning can be rejection. Rejection is a very big one. If your timing is off, you're going to feel dismissed, alienated, rejected. You're not going to feel very good. So just know that the rejection is not coming from you not having something to offer, or not having something to contribute. It's just coming because your timing is off. So again, like, just create awareness around it and trust that sooner or later, like, you're going to be able, when the timing is right, you're going to be able to share your insight, and people, it's just going to work so much more beautifully. Recognition. It takes time to learn to communicate your innovative thinking, and people don't shift easily. You might have to explain yourself several times because before the new concept is told and your genius is recognized. So, just again, with time, and don't let that bum you out. Like, if you didn't receive the recognition that you wanted or that you thought you would get, take the situation and just see it as information. Like, it's just information. Kind of like briefly go over, like, okay, what did I do? How did the energy feel? How can I do it a little bit differently next time? And just use it as like a practice exercise. It doesn't have to determine like this is how it's always going to be. Don't make it mean that you're a freak. You are a genius. Just the timing was a little bit off, and that's why you didn't get the recognition. And the thing is, like, we're not really doing it for the recognition. The recognition just comes because these are so really innovative ways of seeing things, where we literally can change the way people see things and create quantum leaps for them, but they have to be available for them. Okay, so one thing that's really helped me is just remembering that even if this person, it's like I'm not going to be able to share that genius, that quantum leap in thinking with them. I take that with me, and I'm going to be able to share it down the road with somebody else, and it's going to be better. So in conclusion, you can use the energy of the channel 2343 to simplify your own life, but the original purpose of this channel is to help other people. Okay. So for me, this is something that I'm really learning to step into, like opening myself up to more people, because I can literally like just be in my house and not see people and I'm fine. Like, it takes a lot of time. Like, I'm talking months where I'm like, okay, I need to see a person. Generally, I tend to be okay, but I'm also like, I have the 2 in my profile, which the hermits, but now, like, I am very intentionally, in like kind of like very playful manner, learning to socialize more and really leverage this channel, because its original purpose, the gift, is in helping other people. Okay. Develop the ability to speak and correctly formulate your thoughts so that your ideas can be understood and correctly applied. Develop the ability to be silent and not interfere with others when you have not been asked. This one's particularly hard for me. It's one I'm constantly practicing. And the last point that I have in my notes is vulnerability. you're gonna have to get really comfortable with being vulnerable, because, you know, our insights and our ideas are so out there from what's been done, because we are, you know, looking at, okay, this is what's been done, this is how we can do it better, and it could be a completely new concept. And people may not always respond to it like we had hoped, because the tribe or the collective tends to be like in the vibe of like, if it's not broke, why fix it? So it's going to require vulnerability, in the sense that you put yourself out there, and you stand behind your insight, and you stand behind like how and why it's going to benefit the collective or the tribe, or, you know, the person. Obviously, if there's an invitation, this is easier to do, but you might have to, it'll help if you explain your reasoning. Like, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm thinking, so if we do it this way, these are the benefits. So learning to communicate better, expand your vocabulary, especially learn to be vulnerable, and don't take it so personally if even after you tried to explain it and you did a good job of explaining it, if it's still not accepted, it's okay. Like, it's not the right time for the tribe or the collective to accept that idea. Normally what I do is I implement it myself, and I fully enjoy it. Like, it's not like I'm doing the thing, oh, in order, like, I'll show you, like, what I mean. No, it's like, I stand behind this because I see this works to save so much time, and I'm so in love with this concept, this idea, this way of doing things, because it saves resources, that I fully embody that without really caring how other people see it, or, you know, what they think. And what happens is that starts drawing attention without you even being your intention. It starts drawing attention. Like, wait a minute, what's she doing? Like, why is she using, you know, a bulldozer to dig a hole instead of a shovel? Like, she's having the time of her life driving this bulldozer and managing it, and she finishes in like 5 minutes, where we're digging a hole with a shovel for like half a day, if not more. That type of very random example. Like, I've never driven a bulldozer. There's an example of something that just came out of my mouth without me even knowing it was going to come out of my mouth. So this is a channel I'm particularly enjoying learning about and stepping more fully into. That's it. I know this has been a pretty lengthy video, but I have really enjoyed filming it and sharing this information with y'all. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And yeah, I think we're done. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hello again. I lied. There are two things that I think are very important that I forgot to mention in the video, so I'm going to mention hopefully very briefly at the end. Going back to the component of touch, the importance of touch. If you find that your mind has difficulty concentrating, I do this particularly when I'm talking to somebody else. Because, like, when I'm talking to somebody else, like, as soon as they say something and I start forming a thought, it's like my mind follows a thought instead of continuing to pay attention what the person is saying. So I zone out and I don't really pay attention to what the person is saying. So one thing I do is, because I've created a lot of awareness around this, I will literally, like, as the person is speaking to me, repeat every single word they're saying to me inside my head. That way I minimize the chances of me zoning out and, you know, tuning into my own thoughts and tuning the person out, especially because, you know, as a sign of respect, and it's important to hear what they're saying so that you know how you're going to respond, or, you know, paying attention. It's important. The other thing that you can do is
touch. Obviously, if it's a person that you don't know very well, you're not gonna ask them to, like tap your shoulder, things like that. I personally come from like a Hispanic, a Latin culture, and we're very big on touching. Like my mom used to do this a lot. Like she'd be talking and she'd like touch my arm, and I don't particularly love to be touched. But now that I see the benefits of it, like I am a little more open to using this as a resource to help me stay focused and not zone out so much. But like I said, if it's someone that you don't really know, you can just gently grab both of your hands and just gently squeeze them from time to time as this person is talking to you, as a way to keep you grounded. Or like if you're wearing, normally you might be wearing shoes when you're out about, wiggle your toes inside of your shoes so that you create that constant touch or sensation that keeps you inside of your body and you don't zone out. Or you can kind of like just gently sway a little bit, or take your finger and tap your own arm or your leg. Obviously do it like very gently, very subtly, so that it doesn't appear like you're nervous. If you're having a conversation, like a more intimate conversation with your partner or a family member, this is where, being really vulnerable, and obviously if they are someone that loves you, they could be more open to like you saying, okay, whenever you talk, and I zone out, because like I'm starting to think of something you said and I go down like all these different rabbit holes. To kind of avoid that, because I understand this is going to be an important conversation, can we hold hands while we're talking, or can you like occasionally tap me on the arm or on the shoulder, have some sort of contact as you're having the conversation. Something that I do a lot with my brother, because he's like the person I spend the most amount of time with right now, is that even though like I've created a lot of awareness around paying attention, I still zone out, because it's just that channel, how it works. I will tell him, as soon as I catch myself like zoning out and missing part of what he said, I'll pause him and I say, I'm sorry, honey, like I zoned out. I didn't mean to, but I zoned out, and this is the last thing I heard. Would you mind repeating what you said? And normally I miss out just like on the last little bit that he said. So sometimes he gets, like initially I felt like he got annoyed, but the more I explained, like I really don't mean I don't mean to do this on purpose. It's just the way my brain works, and I am learning to work with it and control it and focus on what you're telling me, but I still need more practice. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you, but could you please repeat that? Because he knows me and he's starting to learn how I work, and I explain it to him. He can kind of tell by the look on my face when I've started to zone out. So he'll kind of like pause on his own, and he's like, okay, do I have your full attention again? I'm like, yes, you're absolutely right. Okay, let me focus. Another thing that I find myself doing, which you can kind of see throughout the video, is like when I'm struggling a little bit to form the idea with language, while that structuring is taking place, I close my eyes. I do it like very intuitively, very naturally. Like if I'm out and about with people I don't know, I feel like I don't do it as much. It's mostly like with when I'm doing these videos, or with like my brother, or when it's a more personal conversation. It's very natural, and it feels really natural. It feels really good for me to close my eyes, because it's like I block out, that visual component where like a lot of things might catch my eye. So I close my eyes, and that kind of helps me tune in to like the thought, that auditory aspect of the thought, and I am able to more quickly and more clearly articulate what I want to say if I'm able to close my eyes, because it's like I can focus in or tune out all that external stimuli that gets in the way of me being able to articulate what it is that I'm trying to formulate, from that ajna to the throat. So that's another thing you can try practicing, like closing your eyes, and I find that really helps me be able to sort out what it is I'm thinking and put it into words. So those are the last two little suggestions I wanted to add in there, which I find super, super helpful. I promise, for real, this is the end of the video. I know it's been a long one, but there's a lot in here. There's a lot of information in here. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you all next time.